What's up, man? How are you?
What's up, Bennett?
How's your
Benny Blanco from the Bronx.
You know what's funny is I have one of those names that it's like people just want to do some rhyme or put like something on it or whatever, and they're always
Yeah.
like, "Oh, can I call you this or whatever?" I'm like, "Sure, whatever." Like I didn't choose my name; it was just given to me, so sure, fine.
Yeah, it's cool that you like that because there's so many people that are like, no, it's Clarence.
Well, I don't know. I mean, I might be like on the spectrum or something. Like for me, names like it doesn't seem correct for it to refer to me because I'm like I don't even know what that is really. Like name, like I didn't choose it. It's kind of like when people say like, "Oh, you have good eyes," and I'm like, "I sure, I guess." Like
Yeah,
it's not something that I picked out.
yeah, I feel you, dude.
How's your week going?
I'm finally like slowing down. I had a crazy run and too many consecutive accomplishments in like a 5 day period. So I kind of couldn't pull myself out of it. I needed a couple of days to not do anything. That's what I've been doing today and yesterday.
Yeah, yeah. Well, it's good to get a buffer in, I think, whether it's good stuff or bad stuff. Like I
Mm,
socially, even sometimes like I'm like, oh man, I got to hang out with my friends this weekend, but also like now I need time to myself.
mm, yeah, yeah. You gotta have balance.
Yeah. Do you find that because I think that there's always this spectrum that people talk about of introverted or extroverted, and then people will be like, oh, but I'm different, I'm both, and it's kind of like, yeah, we all are. um
Yeah.
but I think specifically comedians are kind of this odd mix where I think most of them are sort of introverted with this extroverted side, where it's I'm going to spend a lot of time kind of with my thoughts, which is how a lot of this stuff gets written. But then I'm going to make these appearances and I'm going to be social kind of in the times that I'm going to, and then I'm going to retreat. Do you feel like you're kind of like that, or do you think you're more extroverted or introverted?
I agree with the part where you said we're all like both, right?
Mm-hmm.
And I think that goes for humans, but comics, for whatever reason, are more honest with themselves
Mm-hmm.
and more public about who they are, more introspective, and so like we are like everybody else. It's just that we look in the mirror all the time.
Mm-hmm.
And I feel like that's what you're seeing is that we're leaning into our humanity. And then there's a couple comics who are like wild all the time, and
Yeah.
I love those guys. Like
Mm-hmm.
Ian Finance is that way. But
Mm-hmm.
I would say people I'm extremely introverted.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not like people will see me when I get to the venue that work there and they know that I'm on the show and I can tell that they're weirded out by how weird I am or how quiet I am. You know what I'm saying? And then I go on stage and freak out
Yeah,
and then afterwards they're like comfortable with me. And
yeah,
like, you know what I'm saying?
yeah. That's so interesting. I think on a few different levels, and there's a few things I want to unpack from that. But the first of which is because I've noticed this with people as they get older, and myself, obviously. But what was the point for you that, like you said, you're very introverted? What was the point for you where you realized, okay, comedy is something that I can add, kind of, or that I can use um, to relate to people?
Well, I think I always knew it, but I never wanted to. I never wanted to. I don't really like people like that. You know what I mean? I don't, people are where the worst stuff comes from. The worst stuff that happens, short
Yeah,
of natural disasters, is human stuff.
yeah,
So like, in high school, I was a class clown. I mean, all the schools, I was a class
Mm-hmm.
clown. Life got super dark for me in starting in middle school. So I was able, I kind of had to pull back from being jovial.
Mm-hmm.
But I have all my buddies in high school, dude. We were cracking on each other like literally 7 hours straight.
Yeah.
And so I always knew that I could use it but also I didn't have to use it. I'm not one of those people that have to use humor to socialize. I
Mm-hmm.
don't like socializing. First of all, I mean, if I'm talking to you, it's for a reason,
Yeah.
and I can articulate that reason without having and bring you in without being funny. Funny one on one ain't all that challenging. I don't know. It's just I don't want to do it. It's
Yeah.
fun. It's fun when it's a room full of strangers and you got to read the collective consciousness of all these people, especially if they're from the opposite side of the tracks as you.
Mm-hmm.
That there's purpose in that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. What do you think that purpose is for you?
Well, for me, I mean, first of all, it's almost like when people say, "Are you Democrat or Republican?" Man, I'm a second class citizen before anything. I
Mm-hmm.
got to just be honest, man. Like,
Mm-hmm.
in most of America, black men especially are the bottom of the socioeconomic totem pole or
Mm-hmm.
pyramid scheme, whatever you want to call it. And
Mm-hmm.
so, if I have a microphone in my hand, yeah, I want to have fun with people, but I do have a responsibility to say, "Hey, you guys don't understand what's happening because you're not me, and it's not
Mm-hmm.
your fault. But just I
Mm-hmm.
have a responsibility to communicate and articulate to you what's happening with your neighbors, and you don't even know it. And this is
Yeah.
dangerous. This is dangerous for all of us."
Do you think that how do you feel that that's best accomplished for you? Do you think that's in making people laugh and realize that you're just like them, or do you think it's talking about specific issues?
You can't. I'm not. I don't know if I'm good enough to take specific issues and really dig deep like that
Mm-hmm.
yet.
Mm-hmm.
There's a few of them a few bits I have where there's a little message in there, but you got to decode it. You might not think about it till the
Mm-hmm.
next day, you know. But most of all, for me, it's good. It's just easy to just be funny and then just I don't know, just try to poke fun at some little things
Yeah.
that aren't too preachy because
Yeah.
just off the bat, I don't look like or carry myself like somebody you want to mess with. You know what I mean? So like when I go up and I'm a clown, you know what I mean, and I'm maybe relatable to some
Mm-hmm.
people who normally wouldn't talk to me or hear from me, or listen to me. That's an almost enough by itself.
Yeah. I think that's interesting what you said too about not overstating things versus like leaving some little piece because I do think that it comes across regardless. And I find the things that make me think most are the satires where it's not so pointed. A movie where it's not saying, and this is the conclusion you should come to.
Yeah,
It,
no,
it's just kind of making fun of something and then letting that conclusion sort of hang in the air as something that the person has to draw for themselves.
yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
Like I can go on and on about like what it would take for me to date like an upper class white girl,
Mm-hmm.
you know, and I can make that funny.
Mm-hmm.
That's It's all funny. It's not preachy. It's not sad. It's not me complaining or nothing.
Mm-hmm.
But then after you hear me, talk about after the set goes on and you hear me talk about like I don't know smart things that you wouldn't think a public school city boy, project kid would think about or know about, then it's like, oh wow, they're they all aren't the
Mm-hmm.
same. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm. That's interesting. What you said, I think I think something that people don't understand a lot is the lack of difference that you're talking about of people. I think it's almost especially now because we're so like this is my star sign, like this is my specific attachment style or whatever, that so much of it is putting each other into these little boxes where it's kind of like it's almost like to make it. us afraid of interacting with each other to a certain extent. And I think for me, having had all these different experiences when I was young, of being growing up just pretty much in a pretty homogenous area, and then going to being a minority when I was in school, and then you like visiting other places too, and just getting a sense for. I remember kind of thinking like everyone really is the same. It's just that we present different ways, and I think once you know that, then it makes communication so much easier, because if you just talk to people in a straightforward way and you try and communicate, then they'll respond to that. And I think most of it comes down to people kind of putting up little things, or putting up or being afraid. And so then communication gets really difficult and scattered because everybody's kind of playing this shadow game where they're like, oh, did you
Mhm.
think that? Did I think this? And like, am I scared of you or are you scared of me? Kind of.
Yeah. Well, you had a good experience being exposed to different demographics in your upbringing. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I mean,
Like,
most people aren't.
right? Yeah, yeah. And it's
Like,
hard. It's hard to think outside of the box, outside of a box that you were in. And looking at something in another person's perspective is a very entrepreneurial skill that most people don't have.
yeah,
You
no,
know, and
100%. But I think, like you said, it's most people aren't exposed to that.
yeah, you
Uh,
have to be exposed. Well, for the most part, you need to be exposed to it or open to learn about it. If you
mhm.
just open up your mind about stuff and be curious about it, the universe will put it in your lap too. But it's
Yeah,
easier. It's easier to just deal on the surface and be like, nope, this is me, and I don't do this, and I don't do those things, and you don't have to deal with so much. You know what I mean? It's almost
yeah,
like it's almost like the purpose of religion. It makes you. It's like everything's cut out for you.
yeah. Well, it's interesting that you say that. It's something that I'm experiencing right now secondhand, because so I grew up in a small town and we have a rodeo and everything, and we always grew up, like me and my brothers and sisters, kind of with a feeling of we didn't really quite fit in. And so that gave us a sense of, we never had that sense of homogeny where it was kind of like, oh, what everyone else is doing is so cool or whatever, and we just do that. But seeing my littler siblings, and they're kind of in that same culture, but they're looking at this stuff and like, yeah, just driving around with trucks in circles is the best thing ever. And it really, aside from those things kind of seeming dumb, it does limit you in terms of just, it's more of, like you said, living on the surface, versus having more experiences. What do you think the defining experience for you was in terms of opening up your mind to seeing the layers of the world instead of just one thing?
I can't take credit for it, or I can't even really give any experiences that I've had credit for. I've always been. That's just God. I've always been. Like I remember when I was 11, I didn't actually grow up in the projects, but I had a house. My mom had a house that was across the street from the projects, so that was almost worse because I was like, "Oh,
Mm-hmm.
that's nigga with the house. You got a house." You know what I'm saying? So when I come out, so I come outside, and I just remember like just having a huge. This is like the most biggest epiphany I've ever had was like I could go because I take my bike and I go across the street to the projects, hang with the homies, or we go to other little apartments and hang out where there's basketball courts. But I was like, wait a minute, I can go anywhere,
Yeah.
you know? And I was young like this, like so. I've always wanted more. It's almost an addiction. It's almost annoying because I'd rather be sort of plain probably and not, you know what I mean? And not want to go to Vietnam for 2 years or something. You know what
Yeah.
I mean?
What is a blessing and a curse, I think, because I said something similar to a friend of mine. I kind of said, like, I've always wanted to just be a plumber or something. Um, but unfortunately, that's just not the way that my brain works. Was that something that, like, were your parents creative or
Yeah.
thinking that way, or was it just,
Nah,
or it
my
was
mom.
truly down from heaven?
Nah, my mom was a church girl who and I didn't know my dad. I didn't meet my dad until I was 13, 14.
Mm-hmm.
And he was really like not existent even when I met him. And my mom didn't have me most of the time. I stayed with my great grandmother most of the time, and she lived in like a retirement home, where you got a bus through a couple doors, and she's got this little one bedroom place or whatever. She was super sanctified Christian, so like
Mm-hmm.
there was nothing around me that made me, nobody around me that made me influence me to be who I became. I was just weird like that. Even my brothers and sisters. Yeah, yeah. My dad has a lot of kids, so I have a lot of. I guess I got the only child syndrome with my mom,
Mm-hmm.
so I'm explorative in my own head, any as an only child thing. But then my dad has a lot of kids, and we all look exactly alike. But I ain't nothing like that.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know what it is.
Another thing
Hey,
I want to go back to, um, I think there's an interesting thing you said at the beginning where you said something to the effect of like not feeling like you cared about social things, and then secondarily to that, you mentioned kind of feeling this sense of that people see you as being different, um, especially I think white people. And what was the first sense that you had, maybe as a kid, of not being accepted, kind of in those areas and those cultures?
well, all the way up until like I was grown, there weren't any white people around to
Mm-hmm.
even have that
Mm-hmm.
juxtaposition. We had one white kid in elementary school, and he had a speech impediment, so he wasn't even real to us. We paid him no attention, um, and then in high school, I moved to Chicago where my dad was, and I don't. There might have been a couple white teachers, but I wasn't going to school. I wasn't attending like that.
Mm-hmm.
It really wasn't until, oh, okay, so I get kicked out of high school in Illinois. I'm like 20. There's like 22 credits to graduate in Illinois. I got
Mm-hmm.
like 16, 17. I can't make it. Right. I come down here to Columbus. My mom lives in Westerville at the time, so I signed up at Westerville North. It's only 18, like 17 and a half credits to graduate there. So I take like one class and I graduate. I'm good. you
Mm-hmm.
know. So, and this is like February, I moved to Columbus or Westerville, Ohio. And so that was where I really first experienced white people because they were just like nice and they were like talking to me and I'm like shell shocked. Like this is, I'm straight from Chicago, braids down my back. I wouldn't even speak. I didn't speak. They
Mm-hmm.
talked to me and I just stare at them like, wow, what are you? Why why would you talk to somebody you don't even know? You know what I do to you?
Mm-hmm.
I was a much different person. I hadn't evolved much yet at all. And then even the black people in Westerville was like too nice. It was just so weird. Some chick asked me to go to prom with her. I was like, no, I'm not going to no prom. What? Crazy? I think she promised me the coochie too. I was like, get away from me. Um, and then I remember the deans called me to the office because I had scored maybe the second or third highest on the ACTs, and I had never taken the ACTs before.
Mm-hmm.
And then y'all have a proficiency test in Ohio, which people were practicing for. Well, I say y'all, we have a thing called a proficiency test in Ohio,
Mm-hmm.
and they practice for this all their middle high school careers. I hadn't taken it at all ever, and I scored the first highest one.
Mm-hmm.
So they called me, these four white deans, they called me in the office. They ain't even really looking at me. And they tell me I scored these scores, and they're like, "What do you want to do?" after high school, and I'm like, I don't know, bro. Like the army keep calling the house. You know what I'm saying? I'm thinking maybe I don't know, maybe I'll do that or something. And they're like, cool, get out of here. And
Mm-hmm.
it didn't dawn on me then, but I realized they were supposed to be like, you smart, we could put
Yeah.
you somewhere. Like you supposed to, test into something. You can
Yeah.
qualify for blah blah blah. But they were looking for me to say anything that they could just dismiss me.
Mm-hmm.
And that was the first time I felt like straight up oppression,
Mm-hmm.
directly. And then I don't know. After that, I kind of started realizing where I was, socioeconomically. Like
Mm-hmm.
the type of jobs. I don't know. I just knew. After that, I just kind of knew. I think I got into Malcolm X after that. Like, oh shit, we at war, son.
That's pretty. Um, Another thing, like to go off of something that you said that you talked about a time when you hadn't evolved versus obviously contrasting it with now. What do you think changed in your mentality um, from that point until now?
Um,
And was
well,
there like a moment that changed, or was it or was it just a process?
nah. Nah, you gotta think, man. Like when I moved to Chicago with my dad, my brother had just got his son, my half brother had just gotten killed. My family was really scared for me,
Mm-hmm.
and so like I was already a little wild at that age, young age,
Mm-hmm.
and so like I was adaptive as a result of that. As a result of being around older kids and being in the street all night, you just learn, you just become I think that's what happened. I became adaptive. And then when I moved to with my dad, who wasn't really looking out for me like that, I had to learn how to navigate in a whole nother geographic area where everybody was sort of tough. You know what I mean? I think the first night, it was probably the first time my cousin on my dad's wife's side took me out to hang out in the hood, where we was. Some dude was like, "Where are you from?" And I said Columbus, and he said, "Where about where you?" They talk funny out there. They said, "Where you about from? Where you from about in Columbus or some shit like that?" And I was like, "What?" He said it again. I said, "What?" He said, "Say what one more time." I'm like, "What?" Pop, pop, pop. He beat the shit out of me. He was a grown
Uh-huh.
ass man.
Yeah.
So like I just learned to adapt, and then just over the years, I just kept adapting. And then I had a kid, young. So having a daughter, especially, I don't know if you got kids, but as a man, that'll melt you. Having
Mm-hmm.
a daughter, so I just had to get it together, man, at all
Mm-hmm.
costs, and just reading and opening my mind. You know what I mean? And I had a decent marriage at the time, so
Mm-hmm.
a good woman will fix you up too. You know.
Yeah. That's interesting. I think also, I mean, because I work in recovery, and I think that something that is you can't overstate the importance of it is willingness. Because I think that people that I deal with, they could come from horrible situations or good situations, amazing situations, and still be in the same place. And I think that, the real distinguishing factor seems to be that willingness when you get those, like you were talking about experiencing being a father and
Mhm.
being married and being, having like these good influences in a way, but also, like you said, realizing, okay, I'm going to change. Because I
Yeah.
think, because I think, reasonably speaking, a lot of people get those things, they fall in love or they get married or they have, a kid or whatever, and it almost is like makes them double down. Um,
On the crazy.
yeah, yeah. And and I think like, but was there anything within you, well, not really knowing, the difference, was there anything within you that in those moments that caused you to decide to to be willing, I guess is what I'm saying, or was it just something innate?
Yeah, man, I can't take credit for it. I tell you something else is crazy. I remember my mom. We drove from across the street from the projects to church one Sunday morning, and we had to go through this neighborhood to get to the freeway, which was like how neighborhoods are.
Mm-hmm.
One neighborhood is super poor, and then you go next door, and it's like sort of like medium wealthy. And I saw a Lamborghini. This was I was like seven. I was like maybe eight.
Mm-hmm.
Benny, I cried tears, bro. Like a Lamborghini, mom. I don't even know how I knew what it was. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
It wasn't no internet. It wasn't like I saw it on my phone or whatever. I don't
Yeah.
even know how I knew that word.
Mm-hmm.
But so I've always wanted more. You know what I mean? I've always wanted freedom,
Mm-hmm.
financial freedom,
Mm-hmm.
freedom to live my life. You know what I mean? And so yeah, that was always my drive. And then having a kid depending on me just took it that much further.
Yeah. What do you think? What do you think that more looks like to you now? Because obviously, like talking about what that more looked like then, and the changes that you've been through. What at this point right now? What is the more that you're looking at?
Well, it sucks now, dude. Here's where it gets dark. Okay, so my daughter committed suicide in front of me, and it's ever since then I haven't had that ambition. I don't really care. This is
Mm-hmm.
my first time as an adult not having. I mean, I had her as a kid, and
Mm-hmm.
it's my first time not having someone depend on me. It's my first time just being me. I mean, like I can fall asleep anywhere. I don't need to work hard for a house. You know what I'm saying?
Mm-hmm.
Luckily, I have real estate that I purchased when I was doing well.
Mm-hmm.
And I kind of keep up with it. But the only thing I care about now is comedy, man. You can ask anybody around me, like I'm not coming out the house until it's showtime, dude.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not. I don't care about
Yeah.
anything. I'm not that ambitious anymore. But my love for comedy has gotten me far in comedy,
Mm-hmm.
considering how short of a time I've been doing it.
Yeah.
So I'm not like depressed. I don't think about it. But
Mm.
yeah, I don't have that ambition anymore.
That's well. First of all, obviously, like I mean, there's there's nothing I can say.
For
Um,
sure. Yeah.
but my condolences, obviously.
Thank you.
Uh, uh, but 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 secondly, I think obviously that is something that is that's the way it goes. It's funny. It's funny that you mentioned that because I'm reading this book right now, which I didn't expect for some reason. It's like a book about by this famous writer Joan Didion, um, and it's a book about her. It's called The Year of Magical Thinking, and it's about her and her husband dies, and then I think that year her daughter died, um, and that's like her whole family.
Mm,
And it's funny because I didn't know that the daughter was gonna die too. So I went
mm,
into the book thinking it was gonna be some abstract sort of like thinking about grief, but then most of the book is her grieving and then dealing with this long period of time over which her daughter dies. And it's interesting because grief is something that is destabilizing in a lot of different ways. I mean, I think it undoes our view of the world and ourselves. It can, um, but just of the order of things, especially to have somebody who is before you in age pass away.
yeah.
Do you
It's
think?
so debilitating. Go ahead.
Sorry, I
No, I interrupted you. What was it?
um, have you noticed like being in this like just in this moment right now in this kind of just going through this, what what else would you notice has changed kind of in your perspective towards the world, other than obviously like you talked about your kind of drive and wanting more, which you've always had, and this always set you apart? What other than that do you feel like has changed since everything happened?
Well, I'll say being an ambitious entrepreneur, business person over the years before, while my daughter was here, was me living much in the logical space in my head.
Mm-hmm.
I didn't have time for anything that wasn't productive.
Mm-hmm.
I didn't have space for emotions. I didn't deal with people who were in that realm. And
Mm-hmm.
then, in order to survive what I went through losing my kid, I had to deal with the emotional space. I had to deal with the emotional part. And I learned that I learned this. There's this thing where you have a circle of logic and you have a circle of emotion, and then you have an eye in the middle where those two
Mm-hmm.
circles overlap. So I had to learn to live in that space in the middle, and that's a very efficient, effective place to be.
Mm-hmm.
But also, like, it was so debilitating losing my daughter the way I did, that I don't have energy. And that's why I say I don't do anything. If it ain't comedy, I can't really do it.
Mm-hmm.
So I will say that it taught me to look at people and things and situations and goals and everything in terms of how much energy is it going to give me and how much is it going to cost me, because I don't have much. You know what I'm saying? So I
Mm-hmm.
learned to separate. I learned exactly what type of people to separate myself from. I learned quickly once I meet you or know you or have to deal with you where my boundaries are with
Mm-hmm.
this particular person. And I learned who's actually my friend. I can see who's actually an asset to me
Mm-hmm.
right away. And I know how to, as opposed to before, I really seek to reward those relationships the best I can and reciprocate those actions the best I can with people that I do allow close to me, because I know how valuable they are. And there's no money and there's no resources and there's no logical systematic pathway to a bag with those people. These are just people who warm my heart. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm. I think it is interesting, like that distinction, because I do think that we are in an era that's kind of where we're seeing an unbridled materialism in terms of the way that people view the world.
Yeah.
Or, and I always see it like it's all, I'm always reminded of it because I like watching old movies. And in a lot of old movies, especially in the 90s, it was a specific era of that, but it was kind of uh, this dichotomy presented of, going after sort of like endless wealth, or looking for people who just matter because they matter.
Yeah.
And I think that we are in this era kind of where there is doesn't seem to be balance. Like so much of dating is, people are looking for material things. And of course, there's a reason to that in terms of like, yeah, of course you want somebody who's responsible and stuff like that. But then there's an unreason of, like you're saying, like, well, what really matters, material things or people who are trustworthy and valuable. Um, and so it's interesting to hear you say, like, making this distinction in the wake of this loss. Um, what what is one thing that you value most in people who you have around you or who you meet?
Uh, Off the top of my head, I gotta say, good intentions,
Mm-hmm.
pure inauthenticity.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that I need those things, or else it'll drain me if you're not authentic, if you're not self aware, if you're not honest with yourself about who you are, then I'm gonna know right away, and it's gonna drain me.
Yeah, yeah, that's a good one. Um, and then also I wanted to ask you, because you've kind of talked about comedy as being a purpose on a few levels, initially at the beginning of our conversation in certain ways, and then, you know, in this part of your life in other ways. Do you see it as a life purpose thing, or is it just something in front of you right now that means something, is the only thing that means something to you in some ways?
Well, it has to be. That's all I got left. You know what I mean? If you know how what it's like to be a parent, your purpose is just that kid.
Mm-hmm.
You're supposed that kid's supposed to bury you. You're supposed to put your life on hold if that
Mm-hmm.
kid is sick or whatever happens. And so I was a dedicated parent. And so without having that space in my life, it's like comedy is my kid, I guess.
Mm-hmm.
What I try to convey to people is sort of teaching like you
Mm-hmm.
would a kid to teach a kid to survive. Sometimes I find myself being introspective on stage and maybe diving into some of those conversations I used to have with my little girl because she was smart. She was way ahead of her time. And even as a teenager, we'd have these big, deep talks. So yeah, comedy is all I got, bro. So I hope there's a purpose in it. At least for me to make enough money to travel and make it not, cost me money. You know what I mean? It costs money sometimes.
Well, I mean, I think from an outside perspective, I would say, like, you having the experience that you had, and then you having this connection to comedy in spite of and through that, I think it seems pretty clear to me that it is a purpose thing for you.
Oh yeah, I just headlined my first like real show
Mm-hmm.
last week, and where I've headlined a Don't Tell comedy show before, but those
Mm-hmm.
people don't know who's coming.
Yeah.
So I headlined the first show where I was on the bill, and there was a paid group, and it was
Mm-hmm.
at a club, comedy club, the Attic Comedy Club here in Columbus, and like I talked about her. Yeah, it brings the room down, boy, because they don't
Yeah.
expect you to talk about it. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
But you know, I did that, and that was maybe the third time, fourth time I had ever mentioned her
Mm-hmm.
before on stage, and not this night because afterwards I just got away from people. But all
Mm-hmm.
the other nights I've done that, there's always been somebody who came to me and said they lost a kid too, or thank you, or it's not just good set, or that was funny, or the one you said about this, it was thank you. You know what I
Mm-hmm.
mean? So maybe yeah, there's purpose in that where especially men in America, we're only allowed to be angry or calm.
Mm-hmm.
So like, you know what
That's
I'm saying? So
yeah.
maybe guys need to be taught that they can cry and
Mm-hmm.
respect other people's emotions and have that space for other people who are having some sort of emotional reactions to whatever's going on in their families or lives.
Yeah.
Teach
Well,
their
I think
sons to do that too.
yeah. Well, I think that often we talk about purpose for things, and I think sometimes too much we talk about, like, everything is sort of like, what did that mean, and what does that lead to and stuff. But I do think that having experienced, I think, having been through some things in my life where I was looking down the barrel at them, and my thought was just, well, this will never be anything but know, horrible, and something that I can at best close my eyes to. I think it's interesting now for me to see those things being, and I don't ever want to make light or be like, oh, it was all easy. But so it's not like I don't think that everything is good. Some things are really bad, but I also seen those which were just bad be redeemed in a certain way in my life, where the only way that I can help certain people is because But yeah, I was just saying, I think like having experienced some stuff in my life which I thought was just bad, and something that I could avoid at best. I think it's interesting to me now to see that that stuff which I would never say was good be the only reason why I'm able to talk to certain people or help certain people. And it's interesting because again, I would never say that stuff was good or that was for a reason per se. But I would say that, I just know, especially in my job, like those are the things. Had I not experienced that, um, I wouldn't even be able to talk to certain people. And so it's I don't know, it's an interesting sort of paradox because I think people will try and be positive about stuff that's I'm like there's nothing positive about
Yeah,
you
yeah,
know
yeah,
like
but yeah, yeah,
everything happens for a reason. It's like
yeah. But you got, even before my kid, I was a ferociously positive person.
mhm
I had to be, and
mhm
so almost everything I went through before her leaving prepared me for her leaving.
mhm
And one of the things I used to say was, every glass is half empty and half full. You have to choose
mhm
the half full side,
mhm
as above, so below sort of thing. There ain't
mhm
really no good or no bad. You just got to choose the best vibe you can find
mhm
and stay in it.
mhm
That's what helps me looking at that's what helps me not give money to poor, like, panhandlers, because I'm like, no, you chose the bad side, baby. That's on you, dude. You look like you choose a bad vibe all the time, nigga. Look at your coat, nigga. That is from the '90s, bro.
get a different cup and then I'll put something in there.
Yeah.
On the other hand, though, sometimes when they look too nice, it's like I really don't think you need this.
Yeah, some of them be hustling, dog. Some of them be hustling.
Well, especially in because I'm out here in LA, so it's a different. The culture here is different. There's kind of an expectation. It feels like that they're gonna get something from you at times.
Ooh, I ain't seen. I hit a mic and I went to the comedy store, and
Hmm
I took off. I was staying in Vegas, so I didn't get a chance to move around there. Like, I didn't see that yet.
hmm
That's crazy. They're aggressive like that.
Yeah, it's just like some of them are aggressive, but I think just overall there is this expectation that like you're going to, and it's almost like a difference if you don't, And yeah, I mean, I think that's part of the reason why there's a lot of people out here, the weather, and then and then that expectation. It changes in different areas, but like LA and the Bay, I would say are kind of it's definitely along those lines.
Hmm.
Um, but I wanted to ask you, so you have not been doing comedy for very long, but watching you and your material, you have this kind of natural feel for the crowd and for the dynamic because I think a lot of people are funny, and you see a lot of this like with comedians who are great on podcasts is a lot of people are funny, but they don't understand how to be funny in that void when it's just them and they're talking, looking down at these people or up. What do
Hmm.
you what do you think it was for you? Was there something that gave you kind of your natural just comfort and because even just your tone and your timing and stuff just
Hmm.
feels very like it feels like a veteran
Hmm.
feel to it.
I think the timing is the only thing I give myself credit for, and it's not like I study for it. I just
Hmm
kind of know. I just kind of know that. I just kind of know. I don't know how, timing wise, but comfortability on stage, I think it just comes from, I don't know, crime. Like, there's nothing I haven't seen. There's nothing. There's nothing. If I didn't do it, I saw somebody else do it. You know what I'm
Yeah.
saying?
Yeah.
You know, at a young age. So it's like I'm not scared to get up here and say nothing. I don't care about you not laughing. I don't care about nothing. Nigga, it's fun. This is what you know. And so and thankfully, when you have that, um, when you don't care, then you're free to be funny and find
Mhm.
the funny. You know what
Yeah.
I'm saying? And then you don't, and you, ironically, you don't even have to worry about bombing because you're just cool. You're just being you, unless you're just not a funny person.
Yeah. That's a really interesting kind of like separation, like you're saying, of that difference where it's just you're up there being you versus looking for laughs. Do you feel like when you write material, are you thinking this is funny first or this is interesting first?
No, I wasn't trying. I wasn't going for interesting ever. I mean,
Hmm.
now lately, I do a weekly show. So and I've been doing that for like 8 months. So like it's time to do something different. You know what I'm saying? And I'm getting repeat customers now. You know what I'm saying? So yeah, it's time to try interesting. But I've never tried it before. And I'm just now starting that now. So no, I always try to go for funny. And then the other thing about being new is, and my homegirl, shout out to Shayna Rabani in LA, matter of fact, she always tells me I have a voice, but I'm like, I don't know if I do yet. It's too early for me to have a voice. But if you have a voice, you kind of know how you sound and what's going to be
Yeah.
fun. You know what I'm
Yeah.
saying? And
100.
yeah, so I have a lot of stuff that I write, but I most times 90%. They say you write 10 jokes and one of them or 10% of the stuff you write might be funny. I only remember 10% of the stuff I wrote.
Hmm.
And that comes out sometimes if I remember and sometimes it don't. So for the most part, I'm just like talking to the people. I'm just sort of like feeling what's in the room. Like I remember the day after January 6th when it actually happened.
Hmm.
We were doing an open mic at this place called Shrunken Head out here. Irrelevant. But everybody was bombing. And
Hmm.
even the guys who had been around and they were doing their best stuff and not even trying nothing were eating it. But
Hmm.
and I was like, oh, they want to hear anything political.
Hmm.
That's all it was. It was just the collective consciousness had a tension in the room about what had happened the night before,
Yeah. Yeah.
and they just wanted to hear anything re- regarding politics.
Hmm.
And so I just went up there and acted like I was one of the guys who stormed the Capitol, and I just used some stupid little country boy vernacular. You know what I'm saying? And kill. And it's like so. It's almost sometimes it's reading the room, being relatable, being comfortable on stage, and just finding that pulse of the street.
Yeah, well, I think that's what good art is, really. I think because a lot of people making art, especially in this age of materialism and everything created for consumption, um, a lot of people try and make a copy of something good. So they're like, okay, this is what a joke is, so I'll just insert these different
Uh,
things here. But to me, great art is just it's relevant, and
hmm
especially with comedy, like what's funny is what's funny because it has to do with what people are thinking about right now.
hmm
And it's kind of like whether you're completing a thought or whether you're saying something so crazy, in answer to something that people are like, man, I never thought about this before, and I've been thinking about this, and that's something totally,
Yeah.
you know.
Yeah.
I think it really is just about what's relevant.
Yeah. Yeah, and I had the pleasure of seeing Joe DeRosa at the Attic here in Columbus do his thing,
Hmm.
and he was the master of that.
Hmm.
So much so that like he wasn't really getting laughs for like 50 seconds, but it was the best show. It was like top three shows that I've seen there, and I saw
Hmm.
and I saw Chappelle there. So that
Yeah.
that tells you. what quality that is when when a guy can like reach the core of what everybody's thinking in the room.
Yeah. For you, when you see guys like that, do you get, are you kind of, I want to be like that? Are you kind of, I'm gonna be like that? Or are you kind of, I'm better than that? What's your mentality?
Oh, I hate ego. I do
Uh-huh.
not like I do not like comparing myself. I don't like people who are competing with me. I don't
Mm-hmm.
like that, you know, or I don't want to compete with anyone else. But
Mm-hmm.
Seinfeld said it best. It's like we are all being a comedian is trying to find out who you are.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm just trying to get to the core of myself. You know what I'm
Mm-hmm.
saying? That's all any of the greats really did
Mm-hmm.
is they got down to the bottom of who they were, pure self awareness and authenticity, and
Mm-hmm.
communicated it comedically. And when you do that, you kind of reach the people who are close to you, something like you. That's how you get your following. You know what I mean?
Yeah. That's pretty fascinating. I've never heard that described that way, but I think that that is what a great artist does. I think you're right. And I also think, like, going back to what we talked about at the beginning about relating to people, um, I think I always think the individual, the personal is the universal, and I think that anytime you try and make something universal or communicate exactly, in someone else's language, I think that's where it becomes difficult to communicate rather
Yeah.
than when you just say something real,
Hmm.
people have a tendency to respond to that for good or for bad.
For sure. Yeah, that's all I'm trying to do is find who I am. You know what I mean, and relay that to people. And I'm in a good place because I'm I can operate on both sides of the tracks. You know what I'm saying?
Hmm.
And I
Hmm.
think that's what I think my voice is, the mediator between two opposing sides of whatever spectrum we're talking about.
Yeah, yeah. Well, that's what I mean. When you were talking about what your friend said, I was thinking, yeah, like, having seen your material, I was like, yeah, you have your voice, and it's so, it not having seen enough of it, I wouldn't know exactly how to describe it, but I would say something along those lines of it being kind of this. All right, I'm gonna tell you all sort of like what it's like from,
Hmm. Yeah.
and kind of what you're like in a way that, like I was thinking about that, like I'm thinking about that joke that you had about how that white women can't see color because they elbow you out of the way at Starbucks, and that works on so many different levels,
Yeah.
but it's also just something that everyone gets a piece of. You know what I mean? Like every
Mm.
different demographic can look at that and laugh about it from kind of a different perspective, and almost, and think about it afterwards. So I think it is that thing of like you're saying your piece and it's kind of something that everybody's looking at and they're like, oh, interesting.
I'm so glad you saw that, man. I forgot about that. I don't even do that anymore. That's funny, dude. I'm gonna do that again. I'm bringing that back.
Yeah, I mean it works on the level of Starbucks, it works on the level of white women, it works on the level of like people being uncomfortable about race, like
Yeah.
of
Ignoring it.
yeah,
Ignoring
yeah,
it is abusing it.
yeah. There's so many different ways in which that's relevant, like we talked about.
Mm.
Yeah, it was just something that I don't know. I love jokes like that when it works on multiple levels. It's like an NBA player. It's like they talk about someone who's really great scores at every level. At the rim, mid range, and from the three.
Mm.
Like that's what good comedy is. Really, is like where it's something that everybody gets a piece out of.
Yeah, for sure, man. I'm glad that we're in the boom right now. We need it.
Yeah. How do you feel about like I wanted to ask you about this because obviously, like anybody else who does comedy, you post your stuff online, but you're also working it out. And I met this guy the other night. who I didn't think was. He said he was a comedian. I didn't think he was funny at all, or that interesting. Um, but, but hopefully he doesn't watch this. But he said he was like, "Oh yeah, some people like to work stuff out, but it's like I really only care about posting stuff online because that's it's all about growing that over everything else." What do you think about sort of working stuff out in person and the connection between that and posting stuff online? And what do you just think about the whole TikTok comedy thing in general?
Um, I don't want to sound like I think I have it figured out, but
Mm-hmm.
I mean, if I'm forced to answer, I feel like the internet's it's not a great thing for comedy. You
Mm-hmm.
know, and that's why you see some of the best, make you lock your phones up. When you see them perform. Uh, but I'll say, for somebody like me who's just coming up, I have to find the balance. I have to find the balance.
Mm-hmm.
And if you're actually good and you're actually worth people coming to see, because some people will blow up on TikTok, Instagram, and they eat shit on stage in person.
Mm-hmm.
So if I'm actually good, then I should be able to give you something for the internet, and then have something completely different when you come see me.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I'm saying?
Yeah, not just repeating the same material or whatever.
Yeah, yeah. I never really even do the same jokes twice in like the same way anyway.
Mm-hmm.
I'm very conversational
Mm-hmm.
anyway, and so it comes out differently. It's not very scripted at all. There's some sentences that may come out the same way, but they're not going to come out at the same time, and they may not even come out at all.
Yeah, I think about that too. I mean, like in these interviews, I'm prepping. I try and like start thinking about the stuff I want to ask about and things. And I always try. There's no real way to, but I always try to avoid like kind of just avenues of conversation that I've been down or saying anything again. Obviously, it's not totally possible, but there's just this weird thing in my head where I'm like, I want everything to be spontaneous, because that to me is where life is. Like, I love moments of just genuine kind of
Sure.
conversation, connection, and stuff like that. And
Yeah.
when it's
Then also with being a stand up though, sometimes you have to do the corny shit.
mm-hmm.
If
Yeah,
I'm hosting, if I'm
yeah,
hosting at a club
yeah,
out of town and they don't even know me, like I'm doing that tomorrow at Helium in Indianapolis. Like I'm going to do the hits, and it's going to
yeah,
be sort of clean, sort of corny. It's for
yeah,
sure going to get the crowd going, and then because that's the job.
yeah. That's a good perspective. I wanted to ask because I was kind of wanting to talk to a comedian about this. Um, because talking about TikTok and comedy and what works and what doesn't, um, I have my own thoughts on this. But what did you think about the whole quick rise and fall of Matt Rife?
Oh man. Um. So don't get it wrong. Matt's been around. He's from Columbus too.
Mm-hmm.
He's been Ohio's got the greatest comics ever.
Mm-hmm.
He's been around for like more than 15 years, 14 years.
Mm-hmm.
So he can hold it. But when he blew up on TikTok, it was giving people the idea that this is what his stand up is like. You know what I mean? This is what you will experience. This little 1 minute clip or is what
Mm-hmm.
you'll experience. And he's got to do an hour, you
Mm-hmm.
know? And that brought people, so that reached people that weren't normally into comedy,
Mm-hmm.
and they're young,
Mm-hmm.
and then you stick them in an arena. I'll probably, if I was him, I probably wouldn't have took the arena gigs.
Mm-hmm.
Because I don't know if he fell, but I just know I saw him in Yellow Springs with a smaller crowd. It wasn't maybe less than 700, And then I seen him at I heard no, I didn't see him. My homeboy hosted for him in Dayton, and it just you can't do that. Well, oh, not most of us can't do what Matt did for
Yeah,
those few minutes.
yeah.
You know what I'm saying? There's one guy named Ian Bagg who can do stand up, who can do pure crowd work, funny the
Hmm.
whole time. That's one
Hmm.
dude, And there's probably more too that we don't even know. But the arena thing for Matt to take the arena gigs, where if one small section of people are whispering to each other, it's a roar in there,
Yeah,
and
yeah,
that's not his fault. He's a good comic. You know what I
yeah,
mean? He's a great comic, but the
yeah,
way he went from nothing to like boom like that, it's just hard. It's a hard work order. You know what I mean?
yeah, yeah. You better be sure that they like you for who you are, otherwise it's gonna end pretty quickly.
Yeah, and if it's a whole bunch of women who just like you because you look like something, it's like they're gonna they're there to talk to you.
Yeah,
So you
yeah.
just got an arena full of hecklers. You know what I'm saying? You know. And I wasn't never at any of those big arena shows that he did. But if he wrestled any of them down, if he wrestled one of those crowds down, he won, and I'm
Mhm.
proud of him. But that's a tall order. Like I don't think I'm nobody, right? But I don't know if I how to play no arena.
Mhm.
You gotta have big material. You gotta
Mhm.
feel this. You know what I mean? And
Yeah,
these people aren't like long diehard Sebastian Maniscalco fans that
yeah,
just love to see him and know him.
yeah,
You know what I mean? These are people who just think this guy's a phenomenon, and he is, but not in the way they think he is.
yeah. It's interesting the way that I think that you described it is again not something I've really heard before, but that difference between comedy crowds versus universal crowds.
Yeah.
And fame is always just such a distorted perception of who someone is. And that's kind of what cancellation is. Like in some ways, it's just, oh man, we saw the full picture or more of it, and now, and it was always a fake picture,
Mhm.
and so now maybe you have this little sliver plus this big bad sliver, and it's still not the whole person, but
Mhm.
it's changed like the angle that we look at someone kind of. I don't know. It's so interesting. And I was thinking also about uh I honestly I didn't watch the whole thing because I didn't want to,
The
but
special?
no, 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 no. I'm saying that I wanted to ask you about the cat interview.
Oh.
There's reasons there's reasons why enough that I saw was enough.
Uh,
But I wanted to know, what did you think about what do you think? I mean, because obviously anyone who likes comedy, like, or I think if you like good comedy, you like Cat. But I
sure.
also found it, for me, this era of podcasts of ex NBA players going on and saying that I was actually better than Michael Jordan, and it was just because I had a bad coach. Like, I think it's a little weird. And I got a little bit of that from that interview of just like, some of it is true. I mean, he is great, but some of it seemed to me to be revisionist history.
Yeah, I mean, so like he's one of my heroes in the sense in like a Patrice O'Neal sense,
Mm-hmm.
where he's one of those guys who is funny partially or maybe even mostly because they tell the truth
Mm-hmm.
at all costs.
Mm-hmm.
Very authentic people, and so like I like that. I like him being him, and maybe there is some of that what you said, and of course there's that in most people, especially they say comics are narcissists. I think we have narcissistic qualities, and so yeah, he's got a chip on his shoulder. Maybe he's short. That's how they are. You know what I'm saying? You know, he's
Yeah, why is it we think that making short people famous is gonna end well?
they all are almost like you live out there.
I know.
They're all short. But anyway, they all got something to prove. It's cool, man. I mean, I don't care.
Yeah, we need to bring some equality and make more tall, famous people.
Yeah.
Then they'll be
I
ready for it.
I like that. I like that he's. I think he's fingers on the pulse of the street, though. I
Yeah.
think, and that's what I said on stage after that interview was that I believe that comedians are more trusted, better thought leaders than politicians and preachers combined right now. You know,
Yeah.
I mean, now I want somebody else to shine the light on some other people who aren't to be trusted. You know what I'm
Hmm.
saying? I don't know who those people are, but they're here. They're there, and
Yeah.
they have a direct effect on us in the way we live in society.
I think
So,
about that. I think about that though, and I think that one of the ways to do that though is, because I think a lot of comedians spend a lot of time on cancel culture, um, and I think that's fine. I do think it's kind of reached a saturation point, but I do think that it would be more effective to just talk about things honestly in a funny way, and just so we could start again to share a sense of reality, because with all the social media and echo chambers and whatever, it feels like every different person has this little opinion and they're mad at everything else around it, you know
mm,
instead instead of having the ability, like Kat, to just say some stuff that, like, yeah, I thought it was kind of crazy, but like we all related to it. As soon as you heard him start talking, it was already like, yeah, yeah, all right, and like, and you can do that with everything. Some stuff is harder than others to like build the bit right, but I do think that like just being frank and honest
mm,
is a way that we can all do that.
yeah, I think it's the medicine the world needs, man. The news, everything is a lie, bro. Chicken ain't real, dude. Yeah, man. The food, man, it's wild, dude. I went to Peru, man. They had maize, not corn. They had maize. I got full off of two of those. I was like, corn is bullshit. Somebody made it.
I
I don't
know.
eat it. I don't know. I don't know. I'm sorry. It's crazy, but
No, no, I understand exactly what you're saying. Um, well, I want to keep you, but I've really enjoyed this conversation.
yeah, likewise.
Is there anything as we close out here? Um, is there anything that I usually ask people what they want to shout out, but honestly, I'm not. I don't really like that question anymore. But is there anything that you feel like you want to close this interview with, or something that you want to say? Slash, it could just be like where you're performing next.
Um, they won't. I don't know where I'm going next. I don't even be looking at the addresses until I get in the car. I don't even know where I'm. I'm thankful for it though, but I don't be knowing where I'm supposed. Um, I mean, in light of all that we said, man, if somebody's listening to this all the way to the end and it resonates, man, tell somebody close to you some uncomfortable truth. Have some uncomfortable conversation, whether it's your family, your coworkers, or somebody that you think needs to hear something that nobody wants to tell them. Do that,
Mm-hmm.
you know, especially if you know it's real and you know it's positive.
Mm-hmm.
Take that chance and have that conversation, you know. And if it works, then if you can find positivity in those results, then keep it up.
Yeah.
Yeah. And if you don't know how to tell them what to tell them, come to my show and I might tell you. I might know. I might know what type of person it is. I might got the cookie cutter answer to get them
Yeah.
straight.
Yeah. If you don't know, go to Nef's show and take some notes. Well, thank you, man. I so appreciate your time. And if you're ever in LA, if you find yourself in LA, you can reach out to Misha, and she'll have my contact information. Um,
That's beautiful. I want to get out there in April, so I might hit you up.
yeah, 100% do. Yeah.
Thank you, Bennett.
Thank you so much. Have a great rest of your week. And like I said, I really am appreciative of you giving me your time.
Yeah, highlight of the night, man. Thank you, brother. Appreciate you, Benny.
Thank you.
Peace.